Chapter 662 to 664. Homusubi had been able to take advantage of Danzo's lack of logic in his hurry to absorb visual prowess for the advancement of his dojutsu up until now, and had slain him. In fact, even after murdering Danzo the first time, Homusubi didn't dare to relax her guard. Homusubi's nerves tightened as she realized Danzo may utilize Izanagi to affect the outcome of his death. Although she was scared, she knew Danzo wouldn't be able to survive for long if Shodame and Nidame were present. After all, she reasoned, with the numerical advantage and power of the two past Hokage, murdering Danzo N times wasn't such a difficult task. Furthermore, both Shodame and Nidame have learned some of the Senju and the Uzumaki clan's most deadly fuinjutsu. They would have used their enormous expertise battling against the Uchiha clan to find a way to circumvent Izanagi in order to deal with Danzo if they had been told the facts and exact mechanism of Izanagi. There was no way Danzo could survive in such a battle. However, Orochimaru's blunder changed everything. Orochimaru, influenced by greed, made a blunder by hastily removing two key combat personnel, worsening the situation. Despite the fact that Homusubi was irritated and angry with Orochimaru, she remained silent. After all, Orochimaru had no prior knowledge of Izanagi, so his actions were fairly normal given his personality. Even Homusubi only knew about Izanagi because of her past life knowledge. If it hadn't been for that, she might have done something similar to Orochimaru. As a result, she has no right to dismiss Orochimaru. Sigh. Focus. She grumbled as she took a deep breath, and then she put all other thoughts aside and concentrated on the battle at hand. Homusubi poured as much chakra as she could into her eyes as she stood inside the protective armor of her golden Susanoo, attempting to capture the location where Danzo would soon manifest himself. Tsukihi sensed Danzo hadn't regained his sanity and was still acting entirely on instincts when she killed him a few moments ago. To be honest, relying on instincts isn't always a bad thing, because intuition can be more perceptive to danger than rational analysis. However, there are a few things that can't be done solely on instincts. Homusubi is well aware of this, which is why she believes that if she carefully prepares a plan, she might be able to dispose of Danzo within the volcano. Don't you want my eyes? Homusubi snorted coldly. Come and take them! Homusubi knows Danzo is after the pair of eyes in her sockets, so she realizes she can use them as bait to entice him out. And while Homusubi was planning on how to deal with Danzo, the overall situation of the volcano started to worsen. Rumble, crash, collapse. Because Orochimaru sent Shodame Hokage's soul to the Pure Land, the chakra supply to the tree vines that held the volcano came to a halt, and as a result, the tree vines were no longer able to support the volcano's structure. The rocks and boulders began to fall, and the cracks began to widen. While Homusubi was thinking about how to deal with Danzo, the volcano's overall situation began to deteriorate. The pressure inside the volcano began to rise, more gas was emitted, and the volcano began to show clear signs of eruption. Without a doubt, the damage has progressed to the point where unsupported tree vines can no longer prevent the volcano from erupting and collapsing. In the midst of all of this chaos, a dark red complete-body Susanoo appeared out of nowhere and dashed towards Homusubi's golden Susanoo. Homusubi was already on high alert, so when Danzo's Susanoo suddenly attacked her, she was not surprised and reacted appropriately. Bang, bang, bang! With that, the two Susanoo began a new round of combat, from sword and claw combat to hand-to-hand combat, which evolved into wrestling. Both Susanoo wrestled and soon fell to the ground, creating a massive hole that was quickly filled with magma. Danzo and Homusubi were not harmed by the intense heat of magma around them as they wrestled against each other because they were both inside the crystal cavity of their respective Susanoo. Homusubi was unaffected by Danzo's greed and desperation. Even if she sensed it, she didn't seem to mind. and continued to fight Danzo with all her might. She used all her strength to lift Danzo's Susanoo into the air, threw him inside the magma pool at the center of the volcano, and followed after him. Boom! Splash! The hot and melting magma was splashed all over the place as the two massive Susanoo landed in the magma pool. Her Susanoo and mindless Danzo's Susanoo are nearly identical in brute strength, but the presence of magma and its hot temperature make a difference. Tsukihi is Hyuga Kuroto's fire chakra nature clone. She was created with the purpose of mastering the fire chakra nature, so magma isn't a problem for her. In fact, when surrounded by hot and burning magma, all of this clone's abilities increase dramatically. But the same does not apply to Danzo. Not only does magma not provide any significant benefit to him, but it also restrains the corrosive mist released by his Susanoo, limiting a significant portion of his power. Not to mention, the dense magma also limits the mobility of his Susanoo, which is a significant limitation. Homusubi is well aware of these facts, which is why she has chosen to fight inside the magma pool. Roar! Homusubi's Susanoo let out a roar and slammed into Danzo's Susanoo. Boom! The start of the next round of melee was signaled by this explosion. Orochimaru stood at a distance, a gloomy expression on his face as he watched the battle. Orochimaru wasn't feeling well after seeing Danzo resurrect twice. He had no idea that Danzo had already touched the immortality that he had been pursuing for years. Orochimaru is also furious with himself, wondering how he could have made such a blunder. Orochimaru is unsure whether or not he can participate in this battle now that Shodaime and Nidaime are no longer there. He feels as if he stepped on a stone. There's no way to take control of Danzo's body now, and Orochimaru isn't sure if he can even assist Homusubi in solving the problem they've created. He is very clear that he is not Danzo's opponent based on his own strength, and without the help of Edo Tensei, Shodaime, and Nidaime, he can't do anything to Danzo, even if it's Danzo, who has lost all senses and is acting solely on instinct. The movement inside the magma pool came to a halt while Orochimaru was cursing himself. It means the ferocious battle that had been going on inside has come to an end. Who won? Orochimaru muttered, his face unsettled. If Tsukihi is the winner, Orochimaru may be able to negotiate with her and obtain a portion of the benefits. However, if Danzo is the winner, not only will he not be able to obtain some benefits, but he may not even be able to escape alive. While Orochimaru was concerned, the wait was finally over when a massive golden hand emerged from the magma pool. Orochimaru breathed a sigh of relief. It's Homusubi. Then, as he was about to approach her, suddenly his expression shrank, and he couldn't help but exclaim in shock, That is Danzo's arm?" Orochimaru exclaimed in shock. Without a doubt, Homusubi was carrying a white arm that was embedded with several sharingans. Just as Orochimaru was intently staring at the severed arm held by Homusubi, out of nowhere, an arm pierced his chest without him being able to react at all. Spew. Cough. Orochimaru screamed in pain and spewed blood, but more than pain, he was shocked. The reason? The reason is that when Orochimaru looked down at the arm piercing through his chest, he was stunned to find that this is the very same white arm that he transplanted into Danzo's body during the transformation operation. But how is this possible? How can the arm that is already severed by Homusubi appear back in Danzo's body? Even if Orochimaru thought about it, he couldn't get an answer. And this wasn't all that confused him. In fact, even if it was the very same arm, there was still something different about it. And this made Orochimaru more confused. The arm that pierced through Orochimaru's chest had no Sharingan embedded in it. It was as if they were never there to begin with. All this confusion and doubt, and yet no answer. And before Orochimaru could think anything more, he was kicked by Danzo standing behind him and thrown out like a piece of shit. Plop. Already gravely injured and bleeding, when he fell on the scorching ground, it seemed several more bones were cracked, and he soon lost consciousness. After dealing with Orochimaru, Danzo turned his attention and looked at Homusubi. Although hell-bent on killing Homusubi, Danzo didn't rush toward her like a mad dog this time. Instead, he stared at her from a distance with doubt and confusion. Yes, even the mad and senseless Danzo was sort of doubtful at this point. Looking at his hesitant and doubtful expression, Homusubi smirked slyly. Others may not be able to figure out why Danzo still has an arm while his original severed arm is with her, but Tsukihi understands it very well. While she and Danzo were fighting inside the pool of magma, Tsukihi did not aim to kill him. She understood very well that it would be useless as Danzo would change the fate of his death using Izanagi. Therefore, instead of aiming to kill him, Tsukihi aimed to restrain his arm and stop all the chakra flow around that arm. However, Danzo's own chakra has grown too strong and violent, and permanently restraining it was proving to be extremely difficult even for her. Therefore, she changed her approach and tried to seal his arm for a very short instant. She believed that even if that instant was not enough to kill Danzo, it should be more than enough to sever his arm. And with that approach, she proceeded. However, even in that instant, Danzo was somehow able to use Izanagi. But this time, Homusubi was not about to let go of the opportunity presented before her, so she used her own visual prowess and cast a genjutsu on Danzo, trying to affect Izanagi. Homusubi and Danzo's eternal Mangekyu Sharingan were previously linked. Therefore, Homusubi's approach worked, and the Izanagi was affected. It was not disrupted, but two fates, one created by Danzo and the other created by Homusubi, overlapped, tangled up, and resulted in a completely different outcome. As a result, the thread of the fate of escaping death and the thread of the fate of the arm being severed overlapped with each other and resulted in a completely different reality, where although his arm was severed, he was resurrected with a new arm. It's just that the new arm didn't have all those Sharingan implanted in it, unlike the original one. So, it turns out that I can interfere with Izanagi in this manner too, Tsukihi muttered as she sealed away Danzo's severed arm in a storage scroll. This also leads to a new theory. Even the forbidden justice like Izanagi can be affected to some degree if appropriate means are deployed, which means that if the visual prowess of the caster is strong enough, then the effect of Izanagi can be completely eliminated through interference. Well, I suppose this is something that might prove to be useful in the long run. Anyhow, getting back on the topic. After hiding the storage scroll inside her cloak, Homusubi slowly walked toward Danzo. Seeing Homusubi walking toward him step by step, Danzo's bloodthirsty aura gradually subsided and a trace of fear became evident on his face. At this time, he is afraid. And not only him, but even the pair of eternal Mangekyu Sharingan in his eye is also afraid. Having lost all the Sharingan, if Danzo is forced to use Izanagi again, then that would be at the cost of an eternal Mangekyu Sharingan, which is something he doesn't want to do at any cost. The eternal Mangekyu Sharingan themselves wouldn't want to sacrifice themselves, hence the fear. Scared and confused, Danzo took a step back. The first step was followed by the second step, then the third, the fourth, and the fifth. He has just completed the Kekkei Genkai absorption ritual, and then went through a series of battles against Homusubi, Orochimaru, and the two former Hokage. Even if he could use Izanagi to turn all the unfavorable factors into favorable ones, this doesn't mean that the exhausted chakra can be recovered. Therefore, at this point in time, his chakra reserves are also low. Whether in terms of chakra reserves, physical strength, mental strength, or courage, Danzo is exhausted and no longer has the confidence to be able to defeat Homusubi. As Homusubi was walking toward him, she was surprised to find that Danzo's eternal Mangekyu Sharingan regressed back to 3-Tomo Sharingan and then to normal eyes, and even the violent chakra surrounding him also started to stabilize. At the same time, Danzo's expression also changed inexplicably. Homusubi frowned. "You are not—" Before Homusubi could finish, Danzo weaved a series of hand signs and smashed the ground. Instantly, bloody crystals spread out at 360 degrees with Danzo as the center. The bloody crystals were like sharp blades and shredded all the tree vines inside the volcano. The final thread that prevented the destruction of the volcano was cut, and with this, the entire volcano collapsed. Rumble. At the same time, the magma that was stirred up until now was no longer retrainable and finally exploded. Boom. At the moment when there was destruction on all sides, Homusubi noticed that the expression on Danzo's face had again changed into something different and inexplicable. However, before Homusubi could do anything, the figure of Danzo vanished. Swift release. Is Danzo planning to escape? This was Homusubi's conclusion, but after thinking about it over, she felt that Danzo wouldn't escape. After all the struggle Danzo has put in, it would be strange if he just let go of everything to waste and escape. But it's a completely different story if it's not Danzo who is trying to escape, but someone else. Homusubi theorized. Danzo's sudden actions made Homusubi confused. Initially, she thought that Danzo had recovered back his senses, but now that she sees him again, she is not so sure. As far as she knows, Danzo is a veteran shinobi who would never show the unease and nervousness of a greenhorn, yet there were clear signs of unease, nervousness, and anxiousness on his face that only a novice would show. And this made Homusubi frown. After some thinking and observation, Homusubi felt that rather than recovering his senses, Danzo, as a person, has completely changed. It's as if, even if his outer body is still the same until a while ago, the soul inside his body is not the same. It is completely different. Tsukihi muttered, "Is he trying to put up an act in order to deceive me? Or is something really wrong with his soul?" Watching Danzo escape, Homusubi hesitated. Homusubi wants to take away the pair of eternal Mangekyu Sharingan in Danzo's eye sockets. So, in her eyes, Danzo is nothing more than prey. But she doesn't want to forget that the same situation applies to her. In Danzo's eyes, she too is prey. If Homusubi manages to get Danzo's eternal Mangekyu Sharingan and obtain the rinnegan, it would just be an extra ace up her sleeve. However, if Danzo manages to take away her eternal Mangekyu Sharingan and awaken the rinnegan, then that will be much bigger trouble for not only her, but for everyone living in the shinobi world. Knowing this, Homusubi obviously can't take a risk and will have to be extremely careful, hence the hesitation. If it is exactly as she thought, then perhaps she will be able to take away that pair of eternal Mangekyu Sharingan with quite an ease. But if not, and if Danzo manages to pull up a reverse Uno, then the situation will take a bad turn for everyone. What to do? By the time Homusubi recovered from her thoughts, Danzo had already escaped from the cave. Seeing that Danzo is no longer in sight, Homusubi regretted a little being too lost in thought. She then looked around and saw that Orochimaru is also not present where his body lay until a while ago. She muttered, "No surprises there. Orochimaru is still alive." Knowing full well that the longer she stays inside this volcano, the more dangerous her situation will become, she also dashed out of the cave. Outside the volcano, watching the hundreds of meters tall volcano exploding and collapsing, the one-eyed, silvered-haired shinobi showed a despairing expression. In the face of such a level of disaster, Kakashi feels powerless. And what's worse is that he has felt this sense of powerlessness over and over again in his life without being able to do anything about it at all. Back when his father committed suicide, when his friend and squad mate Obito died, when his other friend and squad mate Rin died, and when his sensei sacrificed himself all those times, Kakashi felt helpless. Whenever he remembers those painful memories, Kakashi regrets and wonders, if only. And now that over 1,000 Konoha shinobi are about to die here, in front of his very eyes, Kakashi feels the same powerlessness, even if he wants to do something to save them. He doesn't know how to save over 1,000 shinobi in such a short period of time. Even if he has gotten much stronger compared to those times, even if has become much more resourceful compared to those times, right now, at this very moment, he still feels the same powerlessness he felt back then and doesn't seem to have a way to save the lives of people in front of him. As he was struggling to figure out a solution, Kakashi looked around and saw despair in the eyes of all the Konoha shinobi. The only good thing about the current situation is that no root shinobi is present around to stop him or hinder him from doing anything. Seeing the disaster coming towards them, all the root shinobi who were fighting him and stopping him up until now have escaped without giving a shit about what happened to all the Konoha shinobi still present at the foot of the volcano. For those root shinobi, if all these Konoha shinobi were to die, then it is not necessarily a bad thing, as the inhuman actions performed by them will get buried here along with these 1,500 men. As for whether their wishes will be granted or not is all up to Kakashi. In fact, if he has to save just himself, then Kakashi is not worried. All he has to do is teleport away and he will be safe. But Kakashi can't bring himself to abandon them. His father, his sensei, heck, he himself will never be able to forgive him if he were to abandon them. And so he hardened his heart. I must save them, and I can do so with the help of flying Raijin if I become as quick as Sensei. If Sensei can do it, then so can I. I just need to have faith in myself. With such words, Kakashi suppressed the despair in his heart and inspired himself. With a resolute expression, he weaved the hand signs and, poof, created 5 shadow clones. After that, he threw dozens of kunai marked with the flying Raijin seal and threw them on the battlefield in an array. With the preparation made, Kakashi ordered all his shadow clones one simple task. Bring them all to near the markers, and I will teleport them. The 5 shadow clones nodded, and with that, the figure of the original Kakashi turned into images. Whoosh! 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 The chakra transmission array that sealed the movements of Konoha shinobi flickered constantly, and each time it flickered, a Konoha shinobi was teleported far away, on the other side. While Kakashi was trying to put his all and save the lives of Konoha shinobi, a figure jumped out of the volcano and collapsed on the ground not far away. The area he fell at conveniently happened to be surrounded by several masked shinobis who were part of the root. The root shinobis saw the man and exclaimed in worry and excitement, "Hokage-sama!" That's right. This man is none other than the very same Hokage-sama. However, the Hokage-sama didn't act according to what the root shinobi expected of him. Their leader, Hokage-sama, or better yet Shimura Danzo, looked uneasy and immediately used Swift Release and Crystal Release Eustace to slaughter the leader of the unit, and after doing that, he didn't even waste a second before he rushed out and disappeared into the dark. The remaining ones were taken aback by the actions of their Hokage-sama. They stopped all their movements and looked at each other in shock and fright as an unexpected silence dawned upon them. As this event occurred, a snake slid out of the hole in a tree not far away and looked in the direction where Danzo disappeared with a doubtful expression. The snake here was unable to understand the reason why Danzo killed his own man and ran away. This made no sense. While giving it some thought, the snake used body flicker jutsu and followed after him. Earlier, he was knocked unconscious inside the volcano, but was able to regain consciousness soon enough. Even after he recovered, he didn't act recklessly, knowing full well that he might die. But of course, he wouldn't let Danzo escape so easily as Danzo has what Orochimaru wants. Therefore, when Danzo escaped, Orochimaru closely followed and is going to do the very same thing right now in the hopes that he might get his opportunity soon enough. But the fate be damned. Not long after Danzo escaped the volcano, he ran into the Kumogakure shinobis, who were being led toward the volcano by the Raikage. Looking at the familiar yet not so familiar face of Shimura Danzo, Raikage frowned. However, he didn't forget to shout at the man, "Where is my shinobi, Danzo?" Looking at the Kumogakure shinobis surrounding him, Danzo panicked, and with a quick flash, he tried to escape. Whoosh! Sisi! Sisi! See, but unlucky for Danzo, Raikage was faster and landed his fist on the face of the old man. Bang! Sound echoed. Raikage himself fell back, for he didn't expect Danzo's speed to be so fast. But he is Raikage after all, so he was able to get up soon enough and angrily shouted at him, "Damn you, Danzo! Did you use the same jutsu on yourself?" Danzo did not answer Raikage's question. Instead, he slowly got up from the ground, and while wiping the blood coming from his nose, he said to Raikage, "I don't want to kill anyone. Don't force me." Raikage had his answer, and thinking of that boy, thinking of the boys, family to whom Raikage will have to answer, Raikage grew furious. The nerves on his temple twitched, and he shouted, "A scum like you cannot be allowed to live."